Did you know that in fiscal year 2025, Maryland charged over 1,000 youth as adults? Yeah, neither did I. I'm Gwen Jeffrey, a Montgomery Community Media Next Gen member. I'm here at Action Youth Media, our amazing home away from home, while the MCM Silver Spring Satellite Office is under renovation. Recently, the Montgomery County Women's Democratic Club hosted a community education forum here called Sentencing Children as Adults, Why It Matters. I learned that Maryland's currently sending more kids ages 14 to 17 to an adult court automatically without a judge's input, more than any other state except Alabama. Hearing the raw data and learning from experts like Senator Will Smith, criminal justice activist Eddie Elli, and Professor Kristin Henning, alongside moderator social justice champion Olinda Moyd, my mind was blown, and I think yours will be too. MCM is committed to telling the stories of the youth right here in Montgomery County because local storytelling matters. But you need to hear this for yourself. Let's take a look.
Event co-sponsored by Action Youth Media and the Women's Democratic Club Montgomery County. I'm Cynthia Rubenstein. I'm president, and I'm going to give you a little introduction to the Women's Democratic Club because we like to make introductions and make a pitch for people to become active members. So next slide, please. So our primary job is to get Democrats elected, but we also do a lot of advocacy on the state and county level, including for bills like the one we're talking about today and the issues that we're talking about today. We convene events about all kinds of critical issues that have a national, a state, and a local impact. Next slide, please. This is just a photo. You may recognize someone on the far left who's a good friend of WDC, and we are a good friend of Jamie Raskin's. Next slide, please. WDC has been around for 70 years. We were founded in late 1956. Our first speaker was Eleanor Roosevelt in February of 1957. We sponsor speaker series. We do advocacy, as I mentioned earlier. We do community education panels. Today is a community education panel. It's also an advocacy event. We also do get out the vote activities. We do candidate forums. We're going to be doing a county executive candidate forum on May 3rd. And at the venue to be determined, but save the date. May 3rd would be a good day to hear from the candidates because early voting starts June 11th. And of course, we have opportunities to volunteer for our committees. And the next slide includes our committees, including one that is very active this month and next month and into April, which is our advocacy committee. We are following and advocating for at least 30 bills in Annapolis so far, including this bill. We have communications, community education. Our chair is Margaret Berry, and she is the lead organizer and mover and shaker for this event. And you can see the rest of the committees. If you're interested, please go to our website, find out more about us, and we would love to have you join and get engaged. Next slide. This is our executive committee. Margaret Berry is not only community education chair, but she's also our vice president. And the next slide, please. This is just a sample of the speakers and the people who have been working with us and engaging with us just since June, or just since last spring, including many, many elected officials and a couple of other people, including some of you may know who Simon Rosenberg is, the Copium Chronicles, and Heather Cox Rickus. And the last slide. This is our website. Go to our website anytime to learn more, and I encourage you to join and get engaged with the Women's Democratic Club. So I'm going to turn the mic over to Margaret.
Thank you. And thank you all for coming today. Very excited about our panels, very excited about the chance to really delve into this project, this issue. Legislation is moving, thanks to Senator Smith, and just want you to learn more about why it's so important to have this legislation. But logistics first. I don't think you've had a chance to tell you where the restrooms are. So you go out, the doors came in. Just as you're going out, there's the keys on the wall. One key says A, one says B. If you pick up B, make sure you go to the door that says B, because that's the one that unlocks, and vice versa. So keys are there, out the door to your left. You know where the exit is, and that's the announcements I have in terms of just logistics. So it's my particular pleasure back today to introduce our moderator, Olinda Moyd, right there to my left. And I just going to read something that was on the bio because I just thought it such a perfect summing up of what I think of Olinda Moyd and who she is. Olinda Moyd is a social justice champion who has dedicated her legal career to disrupting the machinery of mass incarceration through her prisoners' rights, parole, past conviction, second look, and reentry work. Her fight to free individuals from carceral state reverberates through her journey as an attorney, professor, consultant, and community activist. And that is Olinda Moyd. But I want to just give you a little bit of the background. So she was chief attorney at the Parole Division of the Public Defender Service in District of Columbia, 30 years. And on leaving that position, she went to Howard University Law School and was an adjunct professor there in their reentry clinic. From there, she went to American University's Washington College of Law to direct their incarceration and reentry clinic. Two of her students are sitting right there. And after leaving that, and she left that position in 2025, she continued to do representation of people who are incarcerated, but she's also done just so many other things. I mean, it goes on, but she's on several boards right now, including vice president of the Sentencing Project Board, executive member of the executive committee of the Maryland Alliance for Justice Reform. She serves on the DC Council for Fort Excellence. She's also on the advisory board, appointed by Governor Moore to the advisory board for the Maryland Correctional Ombudsman. And that correctional ombudsman is in Maryland looking into the state of the Maryland prisons, in large part because of the hard work that she did in advocacy. Yes, sending others. The hard work that she did advocating for that passage of that legislation. And her work just continues in terms of advocacy. And for any of you who've been to Annapolis and banging on doors and going to hearings, you know what that commitment means. Hours and hours of hard work. And indeed, she'll be speaking on behalf of Major and at the event on Tuesday of next week for the Women's Pre-Release Rally. And could you mention the date? I don't love you, Dick. It's Tuesday. Is it next week?
Tuesday, March 3rd.
Tuesday, March 3rd.
12 noon.
And we'll mention again at the end of the... Okay. Well, she'll be representing Major at that rally. So again, just ongoing work. I really could go on. She's done international, continues to do international work. I know I'll stop. She's telling me to stop. Let's stop. Okay. Just ongoing work, publications. I just flagged these because these are things that are out there that I just find so amazing. She's a wonderful woman, and I'm just so glad to go with also. Thanking Professor Barry. One of the things that she did not say is that after I retired the second time, I really was planning to slow my lighter down. And I got a call from Margaret, who said, not yet. Come to American and teach. And so I was honored to step into her shoes by directing the decarceration. So thank you for that introduction. It was way too long. So we are here today to talk about our children. I'm glad to see some young people in the room. This conversation is just really important. Elijah Cummings, the late Honorable Elijah Cummings, said he always quoted, I don't know where he got the quote from, maybe it's Elijah original, but he always, in spaces where there were conversations about our children, he always said, children are the message that we send into a future that we may never see. So that's why when we talk about how we treat our children, and especially how they're treated by the criminal legal system, it's just so important. So I'm really honored to be a part of this conversation today, and excited about the panel that we have put together here. I will introduce our panelists, and then we will have some questions that I will pose to each of you. Ladies first. Kristin Henning, Professor Henning. She and I worked at PBS at the same time, and I was just always honored to be her colleague and just always impressed by her commitment to do what's right for our children. She is the Bloom Professor of Law at Georgetown University Law Center. She's director of its Juvenile Justice Clinic and Initiative. Professor Henning, she wrote a book called The Rage of Innocence, which I have a copy here, How America Criminalizes Black Youth. It was published in 2021. The book was featured on the front page of the New York Times Book Review. It received high praise in the Washington Post and won awards. She has published other books and articles on the treatment of Black youth in the criminal legal system and related subjects. Kristin Henning. Our next guest that I will introduce is a dear friend of mine, Eddie Elli. He is a native of Washington, D.C., who at the age of 16 was sentenced to 22 years in the adult system. He was paroled after serving 15 years, and since his release in 2006, he has dedicated his life to helping others who struggle to rebuild their own lives. Since 2018, he's been a member of the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth and serves as the co-director of Outreach and Membership Services. He has also written a book that is a wonderful read, Change is Possible. Eddie. Now, please, we are honored to have with us today Senator Will Smith. He was sworn in to the Maryland State General Assembly on December 21st, 2016. He was elected to a full 4-year term in 2018. He's the first Black person to represent Montgomery County in the Maryland Senate. Awesome. Smith has served in the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee during his entire tenure, and he has chaired the committee since 2020. We don't always agree, but we always support legislation that he puts forth that advances necessary reforms, and the legislation that he passed this year on the automatic sentencing is certainly one that the Maryland Alliance has support. This is the second session in which he has sponsored this legislation to limit the use of automatic charging about children as adults. Senator West.
Yes. Your life story is um so we are going to just kind of have a conversation today. Um every state has some transfer mechanism to charge children as adults. 28 states and the District of Columbia have automatic charging provisions. Charging youth as adults increases reoffending and it harms public safety. The Youth Charging Reform Act has been introduced by Senator Smith and Delegate Bartlett to begin to address the harmful practices of automatically charging children in the adult system. Maryland sends more young people to adult court per capita based on the charge than any other state except for Alabama. We have an opportunity to make meaningful progress through this legislation. And I'm excited to announce that yesterday it passed through this. So I just have a few questions that I will ask to the panelists. And certainly we want to give you all an opportunity to ask questions also. But let's first start with just a general discussion of what is the problem. Let's look at the historical treatment of children in the criminal legal system. And so I will start with you, Professor Pino. If you could give us a national perspective of what we have done in this country, charging children as adults and the effect they.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to start before we even dig in on what's happening here in Maryland to understand all you have to do is look across the country. And we have seen that prosecuting children as adults is it's ineffective, it's inhumane, and it disproportionately impacts Black and brown children, right? So when we think about how it's ineffective, we want our goal, right, is to reduce crime and increase public safety. But the research shows that when we send young people to adult prisons, they are more likely to re-offend or to re-engage in criminal activity than a young person who got sent or processed or engaged through the juvenile legal system. And when you think about it, right, like that makes sense. We don't need science to tell us that, right? Think about the ways in which young people who come out of adult facilities are barred from employment, right? That because they can't get hired, the employers won't hire them. The ways in which they are separated from their families and other important contacts during those critical adolescent years. Think about the ways in which they are deprived of their education. They don't have access to the mental health services and the rehabilitation that they need in adult facilities. And also think about how prisons, an adult prison, is the last place we want young people to develop their critical adolescent skills. Like, you know what I mean? Think about social engagement, right? Critical thinking, problem solving. All of those things that are so important during adolescence are really complicated, made very, very difficult in an adult prison where it's all about rigidity, right? So it undermines healthy adolescent development and actually really cultivates norms or reinforces sort of the norms that happen in facilities, like the retaliation, right? The in some ways, to be quite frank, misogyny, right? The aggressiveness that young people are forced to see in those adult facilities gets mimicked on the outside. So it's not effective. It's also not humane. Would you want any of your children to be sent to an adult facility? It is a dangerous place. We think about physical abuse, sexual abuse by not only other inmates, older inmates, but also by guards in the facilities, right? And then psychological abuse. Think about solitary confinement and the ways in which young people in adult facilities are more likely to end up in solitary confinement for any number of reasons, even when it's considered to be administrative safety of the child, right? Because they're put into isolation, for their own protection. That's the worst place a child can grow up. And the rates of suicide are much higher for young people who've experienced isolation than solitary confinement. And then finally, thinking about what we all know in this room. I imagine we're drawn into the space because you know about the ways in which transfer of young people to adult court disproportionately impacts Black and Brown. We could pick any state in the country and look at those statistics, right? And just a quickly give you a couple of examples to see where Maryland sits, right? Think about Florida. Has 67% of its young people in adult prisons are African American, even though Black youth make up only 20%. Missouri, 72% of youth in adult facilities are African American, even though they account for 14%. And then we come to Maryland, right? And then Maryland, like Professor Moyd already said, is got some of the highest rates across the country of disproportionality. So you're looking in Maryland at 83.4% of children housed or in adult facilities are African American or transferred. Let me be really precise about the data. Transferred to adult court are Black youth, even though they account for only 31%. So we should be really troubled about that.
Thank you so much. My next question is to Senator Smith. I had the opportunity to watch the YouTube video where you introduced the bill, and I thought that the historical perspective that you presented regarding the way juveniles and our children are treated and had been treated in the criminal legal system centuries ago was very, very striking. So can you just share with us that history and bring us up to where we are now with the DJS?
Sure. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Will. It's actually really nice to be in this space because I was on the board of Gandhi Brigade, which is the predecessor organization on the Attribute for Montgomery or Attribute Youth Media. So it's really, really great to be here. So good to see the pictures of Richard J.E., who is a dear friend. He's the former founder and executive director of this organization. But the history that you were referencing is really important, and I think is directly connected to where we are today in Maryland. And so the prior Secretary of the Department of Juvenile Services, DJS, initiated some research, and they came upon a Potter's Field that was located at Cheltenham, which is in Prince George's County, which is a youth detention center. And we did some more research and I actually went out, we visited the site. A couple of Washington Post articles were written about it. And we did some more research, and we found that the Maryland General Assembly, my predecessors in the Maryland General Assembly in the 1830s, made the progressive move at the time to understand that kids did not need to be in adult prisons, that you shouldn't be in adult prisons. And so they passed legislation in the 1830s. It didn't get up and running until the 1850s for funding issues, but it was only for white children. It was called the House of Reformation and Refuge, only for white children. It took another 40 years before the General Assembly passed similar legislation creating a facility for Black children, and that's where the Cheltenham location is in Prince George's County, Southern Maryland. Now, that was a progressive move. It was before the Civil War, and it was something here, as the governor always says, we are the most northern southern state in Maryland, but obviously a slaveholding state. And so we applaud them for that. But the actual facilities and the treatment of these children was deplorable. And we always talk about the second founding of America with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. 13th Amendment has a little bit of a loophole in terms of obviously eradicating slavery. 14th Amendment is equal protection, due process, birthright, citizenship. 15th Amendment is universal suffrage for men. And then so you have this kind of second founding, but the children that were in these facilities were treated like slaves. They were leased out to local properties in sometimes deplorable conditions. You see a lot of the death certificates that show that they died from frostbite, from being out working and then coming back into a facility, not having a proper attire to stay warm. You see that there's one instance of a child being hit by a hatchet by one of the guards. Tuberculosis was a significant cause of death. And a lot of these children were there because of things like vagrancy, wandering, or just being poor. We're also learning that a lot of them were there because of just mental health issues. They were being housed in warehouse there for mental health issues. So the legislation you're talking about is a commission that we're going to create to investigate this history. They're going to do genealogical research. They're going to do some DNA research. They're going to do historical research, come together, produce recommendations for the General Assembly to take next steps. By the way, this Potter's Field, I mean, there are 4 grave headstones this whole thing is overgrown. And you can only tell that it's a graveyard because there are cinder blocks in rows, unmarked. I mean, it's a real tragedy and a stain on our history. I think it's important to understand and internalize this history, to teach it, so we understand that those same through lines that resulted in that deplorable circumstance are still very much connected to our practices today. And those are borne out in those statistics that you talk about. 9 out of 10 youth charged adult are children of color. 8 out of 10 are Black boys and Black children. We are, as you noted, we charge more youth as adults per capita than any other state except for Alabama. So we are a gross outlier in that regard, and it's directly connected to that tragic history, that tragic racist history, that we have an opportunity to address new legislation. And I'll just close with this. One of our reforms that you put together is a commission that helps look at our juvenile justice system and then produce recommendations on an annual basis. In their most recent report, they cited there's something called the Juvenile Justice Delinquency and Prevention Act, the JJDPA. That requires that sight and sound separation, among other things. And Maryland is the greatest outlier in sight and sound separation. Last year alone, we had over 1,600 violations. We talked about the negative and detrimental impacts that can happen in terms of exposing that youth to an adult population. So we're such an outlier that those data are not even in the report because it would skew the national picture. So we're spending, and when a kid goes into the adult system, it's not about $1,500 a day. It's going to be an average of $150,000 for that, say. We're spending tens of millions of dollars. And guess what? Ultimately, they end up coming back down to the juvenile system after that 2-year stay, after that 3-month stay. And when they're in the adult system, they get no education and they get no services. We're spending a lot of money to get terrible results and doing terrible things to the prospects of that youth when they come out. And so the legislation that we're going to discuss a little bit today seeks to curtail that activity and make sure that the kids that are enmeshed in the criminal justice and have the supports and resources to get back on the right track, they're going to save a lot of money we can reinvest to build out that programming. It's just a smart way to do it. If you're not moved by the racial component or racial injustice, you got to be moved by the technocratic savings and efficiency of government, because those two things come together in the efforts that we're trying to push.
Thank you. Mr. Ellis, we've been talking about the history of how we treat kids in the, system. You extended. Can you share for those who are here today, as much as you're comfortable share,
about what it was like at 16 years
when to adult facility?
Thank you. First of all, I want to say at the age of 16, I was locked up some of most of life. They had the one night a gun, and unfortunately lost his life. So I take full responsibility for that, with any excuses for what happened at that time. But it was a horrible experience. You tell me, as a child growing up in Washington, D.C., all I wanted to be honest was a football player or basketball. I got a chance to run a Joe Gibbs football camp when I was a kid. Joe Gibbs was born my idols. I got to meet Darrell Green, Dexter Manley, Charles Mann, and a few other people. And those people were present in our community. They came to our schools. So as a child, I said, if I can become them, I can help other people. I can help my family. And the same hope that they give me, I can get to up. But unfortunately, some of that environmental things that took place in Washington, D.C. affected my child. As a child, my father was shot and killed. So I understand both sides of this aisle. As living as a survivor, living as someone who caused harm. But growing up without my father was really a hard thing. My mother was there every day. My grandparents were there every day. But seeing my father twin made me realize I don't have my dad. But going into the system was very difficult. Dealing with solitary confinement. I was a kid that was very outgoing, loved the wilderness, loved to be out there. Wow. I was a city kid with a country heart. That's why I always consider myself, and that was taken away from by being a solitary confinement. Not being able to move around, we wasn't being able to go to the education department. We wasn't able to do too much of anything because we were children. But what I realized as I got older was that they had children wings in children's hospital for other hospitals for reasons. Because they're children. But when we in this prison, you have us around adults. And that's what the system is built to do, to deal with adults. And they're not doing that very good. So to have children in these spaces that you're not adequately able to support and help while they're in these spaces, you're really harming these children. As we grow, as our brain grow, as we would begin to mature or try to mature, right? We're in a space that's not really built for us. And we're taking on things that children should be taken on. Yes, I caused harm as a 16-year-old young person, but I was still a young person, right? I couldn't sign contracts, I couldn't drive, I couldn't do a whole lot of things legal, but I was charged as an adult, placing a place that was very dehumanizing and harmful to me and many others. So prison for children is not a good place. It's a lot of things that could happen for children in the community with community program that has worked, and statistics have shown what has been helpful and what has been harmful to children. And we have it in front of us, but sometimes we still choose not to pay attention to these things.
And one of the things that you describe in your book is being in a setting where you would just not to be kid, just not be able to be big. And you talk about the hyper masculinity at Amy that can you speak about that to you?
Yes, I mean, it goes, so I can go back to when I played football. Football is a rough sport. You have to be physical. Playing football, you're not going to last if playing football. And that's the way I was taught to play football. By the age of 13, which is my youngest highlight, I've had probably 30 fights because of the environmental thing. So you go into a prison setting where adults are. You can't express your emotions like you think you could, right? Even as a 16-year-old, right? My repertoire with expressing my emotions wasn't really there other than anger, right? Because that's what I was taught in certain environments. How do I protect myself? I know I can't cry right here because someone may take advantage of or try to take advantage. So anger and aggression became something that was normal, but it's not something that every child in these situations want to do or want to be. It's a sense of protection, right? So I think of people in different workspaces. If you join the military, it's certain armors that you have to put on to be in these spaces. When you become a law enforcement person, it's certain armor you have to put on to be in these spaces. And as a child, how do I survive without putting this armor on and thinking somebody might try to take advantage of it? And that armor became a part of who I was until I learned how to break that armor down and learn that I can become something different. But as a child, it was a form of protection and not something that we actually wanted to do. It was something we knew we had to pick up, a certain walk, a certain swagger, a certain way to respond to things. Or you may become a predator. On the other hand, you may become a victim, and somebody may prey on you in those situations. So, and I didn't want to be preyed on. So I picked up what I thought was the right thing to pick up to protect myself, because I knew correctional officers couldn't protect them. I knew the system couldn't protect me. And this was very harmful. Young people had to band together at times to protect themselves from people who may have been preyed. because the system wasn't going to. And that wasn't every older person in there, because there was a lot of good older people there who were very good people that happened to be in prison. But for me, it was just taking on something that I knew that I need to protect myself at the time.
And I will do a plug for your book. If you really want to know the details about his survival and that sister, I encourage you to read this wonderful. Professor Henning, I have had the opportunity to hear you speak about your book and be interviewed about your book, and you always share the story of Eric. Can you, for this audience, share the story about Eric?
Yeah, and I'm going to say the story of Eric builds upon some of what Eddie's saying for different reasons, right? This theme that you pulled out about kids not being able to be kids and kids being different. So let me say that I really appreciate what I hear is adolescent bravado in response to sort of the environmental conditions, right? So there's that aspect of what it means to be adolescent. But then there's also what the research shows about all adolescents. Forget the research. It's what we know based on having been an adolescent and watching our kids grow up. And so what do we know about adolescents? They're impulsive, reactive, emotional, they're sensation seekers, risk takers. They do what their friends do. Sometimes they even do what they think their friends are doing, right? Even when they're not. And that's just a part of adolescent development, with or without those particularized, environmental circumstances. And the reason why Professor Moyd wants me to tell the story about Eric is because it demonstrates the ways in which certain groups of kids, specifically Black and brown kids, are not allowed to be adolescents. And so I have been representing children in the nation's capital for the last 26 years. And in that entire 26 years, I had only represented 4 white children. Talk about racial disparities. That's the most appalling statistic you can imagine. Every other child I ever represented has been an African American. And so Eric, I call him Eric for purposes of conversations like this, was one such child. 13-year-old African American boy who was at home on a Saturday afternoon watching a movie on TV. He sees someone in that movie making a Molotov cocktail. His creative mind, also a very positive indicator of adolescence, right? But in his 13-year-old mind, he decides, ooh, that looks cool. I want to make something that looks like that. He doesn't research it. He doesn't look it up. He doesn't ask anybody, what is a Molotov cocktail? He goes instead into his kitchen. He grabs a glass bottle. He begins to pour in whatever liquids he can find in the kitchen, including bleach and all other kinds of liquids that aren't even flammable, by the way, right? So he pours the liquids into the bottle. He then tapes up the bottle with black tape, right? And he wants it to look like a Molotov cocktail. So my favorite part of the story is he goes to the bathroom. He gets a piece of toilet paper. He runs the toilet paper from the inside of the bottle to the outside, closes up the lid, right? And this is his taped up bottle. He's a kid. He's 13. It's Saturday. He completely forgets about it. In fact, I've been over to his house. They've got white carpet. And he says that so that it will not spill out on his mother's white carpet, he puts it in his book bag, doesn't think anything about it. You all know where this story is going. Monday morning, he grabs his book bag, not even looking at it. He walks into the metal detector. A school resource officer sees that as it goes to the metal detector and says, hey, what is this? He literally, still not thinking anything of it, said, oh, that's nothing. You could throw it away. He grabs his book bag. He goes on to class. Next thing you know, the school has just been overcome with police officers, fire department. They get him out of class. They arrest him at his school in front of his classmates, in front of his teachers, right? He gets held in detention overnight and brought to court the next day. That's how I meet him. Right. So I'm thinking like I'm going to hear this crazy story about, this arsonist, because in fact, he was formally prosecuted for possession of a Molotov cocktail and attempted arson of a school. Right. For this bottle that even the police, the fire department, when they came, could smell it until they poured it down to safety, knowing it wasn't, any kind of flammable item. So this is what we're dealing with. So when we think about like statistics, right? On like serious and violent crime or felonies or the FBI index of violent crime. Very often, I'm telling you, after 26 years of representing children, Black and brown children are being accused of very serious offenses, often that arise out of what? The key features of adolescence that all of us engaged in. Right. And so I think it's just an important to understand that, how essential it is to let kids be kids, and even to understand and respect and offer support and guidance for adolescents who, like normal human beings, are responding to the traumas they experience in their lives. But we don't do that for so many kids in our society. Thank you.
Senator Smith, can you talk about why does it even matter whether a child is prosecuted in juvenile court versus an adult? So we know that 60% of the cases that are start in the adult system are sent back to youth court anyway. So why does it even matter where child is charged?
That is the question. Actually, I think the latest report that you got, it said 80%, the ones that originate in the adult system actually either get dismissed or are transferred down to the juvenile system. And I talked about this a little bit at the top, is that when you are in the adult system, it is not geared toward providing you with those supports that you need. So you don't have access to school, you don't have access to the array of services that you need that are age appropriate for you. And so that's one different. And then you're in solitary confinement, the sight and sound separation. Maryland violates that more so than any other state in the nation. So for all those reasons, you're not getting support, you're isolated, you're not getting educated. And then you're ultimately going to be coming back down to the juvenile system, or you're going to get dismissed, or it will be time served. So
it's a really inefficient process that gives you terrible outcomes and wastes a ton of money.
And so if you start in that juvenile system, you're going to get those services, you're going to get the attention. The recidivism rate is dramatically lower. You're going to have better outcomes for public safety, better outcomes for that youth. And by the way, we're going to save a ton of money that we can reinvest in building out more programs, which we don't have enough that did it. We don't. So it just, in terms of the function and the results, when we're doing it wrong, and it's in the history that we explained and I've talked about, and the outcomes that we had today,
Someone asked me, actually having a conversation on, let's say, which state's attorney said, well, why don't you just wait a couple of years and let some of these services build out a little bit more?
I'm saying they're already going back to the juvenile system anyway, except for wasting all this time. They're wasting up to 2 years. You're going to get there. And if there's the fierce urgency of now, you talk about all those detrimental results and that baked in history, it's incumbent on us to act now.
I have spent a lot of time in prisons. Never been wasn't sufficient or through the front door. I just kind of go and spend time with people that I made friends there with, and support the Lifehouse groups, and certainly to my representation. And it always struck me when I was at the DC jail, and we were in that hallway where the young people were supposed to come and go to school. Just seeing the children walk through this adult facility, it was just an experience that I never forget. There was always something inside of me that said, they don't belong here. These are children. They don't belong here. Regardless of the sight and sound restrictions, policies that are supposed to be following, children to my going in adult prisons. So let's talk about solutions. Senator Smith, talk about, if you would, the goal of the legislation, how it narrows the list of the actual offenses, and why charging children as adults, why is reform needed at all?
So as we talked about the disparities, but in Maryland, we have 33 offenses that are eligible for automatic charging. The bill that I put forward, admittedly, was not the whole thing. Right? I mean, some iteration of this bill has been before the General Assembly for 14 years, just to give you some context. This is the first time to advance that risk. So initially the bill came in at 11 offenses, and you were trying to target the offenses that most mirrored the offenses that started off in the adult but they'll come back to the juvenile system anyway, because that's where you're going to have the biggest bang for your buck and make the most impact was children. So the bill came in and had 11 of those offenses, and once it got out of committee, we're down to 9 or 10. We're about down to 8 now, which fully cover it's the 2 offenses that are most common in terms of what starts off in the adult system come back down are in the bill. And it's going to impact the lion's share of the children that are now being auto-judged. It's not perfect. We're not done, but it is significant. And it's going to save a lot of money and a lot of time. It's going to get more coordinated, to get better outcomes for children and better outcomes for public safety. We were able to work together and get 2 of the 3 Republicans on board. And that's why I talk about 2 sides of this. One is the kind of the racial justice equity piece. That doesn't move you. Maybe there's an efficiency technocratic piece that, and the 2 together makes a pretty compelling argument, but maybe if one doesn't and the other does. The crutch that some folks were leaning on was the efficiency piece and the outcomes piece, which is fine. I don't care. I just want your vote. And so we were able to get it. 2 of the 3 Republicans voted for it, and it's going to be on the floor next week. But that's kind of the tough part about legislating, because there is still so much more on the plate that I want. But I also understood what was the art of the possible and getting the most done. That is not a popular line in advocacy communities, because the advocacy community is designed to push. I understand that. Then when you get in a state with 6.5 million people and 47 other senators that you got to bring along in an election year, I have to kind of take all those things into account and push for the best product possible, to make sure that we don't go another year with nothing. And so, I know it's not perfect, but it is significant, and I'm really proud of what we're about to do.
So we did hear that there was an amendment. Is that the amendment change in the number?
That's right. It cuts it down. You remember, it cuts the offenses down, and then we added some reporting language, so we have some more granularity. So we could come back and say, listen, this is working. You should go get the rest of the offenses. So we wanted more granular recording. And then we also put in Sarah Love's bill, which is to ensure that sight and sound separation, that DJS and the Department of Corrections in Maryland fully adheres to that federal requirement, which we're getting fined for every day, by the way. And so that piece is also in there. So there's a commitment to making sure that we have sight and sound separation for real. But we also think that by reducing the auto charging, that's going to help take care of that. That's going to be a significant piece of taking care of that, because you're not going to have these kids in the adult system. So these things work in tandem. It's a significant step, and like I said, it's the first time in 14 years that it's advanced out of a committee. The fact that it's advanced out of the committee with a 10-1 vote, with 2 Republicans voting for it, I think speaks volumes more. The narrative that you were able to create and the history you were able to show, and the numbers that we have, and the disparities, makes a case that it's a bipartisan issue as a loss.
And it's also a testament to the work that you've been doing to get this done. You said so. Thank you. Mr. Ellis, can you talk about what it was like as a 60-year-old sitting in the courtroom, being charged as an adult? What was that like? Did you understand what was going on? Did you understand the gravity of the situation that you're in?
No, I did. But I understood then someone lost their life. And that's something that I wrestled with every day, still to this day. This happened in 1991. I still wrestle there to this day. But no, I did. There was a lot of language that was used that I didn't understand, and I asked questions like, I got you, don't worry about it. And it's like, how can I tell my truth? It's government witnesses who said they saw him pull a gun out on me previous occasions. Government witness said the same thing the day he lost his life. again, I will never make up the excuse when someone lost their life. But when we talk about listening to a child, hearing the child out, and people just saying, all y'all say that. You know, all y'all say that. I mean, I hear that from everybody. But I'm like, what was I supposed to do? Yes, I wasn't supposed to have a gun. I got the gun after he pulled the gun on me twice before that. Never shot a gun a day in my life. But they were just confused. I really didn't. I'm not pretending like I did. You know, I mean, law is a different language. You know, and if you don't understand what's being said, you don't. This motion being filed, what's a motion? Why is a motion being filed? I might ask my lawyer that, why is a motion being filed? I didn't know what a motion would be, a motion to try to do this. But why? And I didn't understand. Even coming back, hearing other people saying the same thing, I don't really know what's going on. I think I'm going to go home. And I know one of my friends said, man, I think I'm going to go home. Because my lawyer said a motion been filed. But the motion was filed by the prosecution to do something. He ended up with 2 life sentences. You know, he came home a few years ago, but I'm just saying to myself, you don't understand it's going. The process is too difficult to understand. It's an emotional thing that you're dealing with. It's a guilt thing that you're dealing with. It's a shame thing that you're dealing with. Because I'm sitting out here living in my mother, my grandparents, the baby brother. You know, I feel ashamed that I'm in the situation. Then I'm looking at, you know, if it's seen his family. I feel ashamed and sad that this happened because of our situation, because of my ex. You know, so emotionally, I wasn't able to be present. You know, not at all intellectually understand what was taking place. So the clear answer is no, I didn't.
Do you remember there being discussions about whether you should be charged in adult court versus juvenile court?
Yeah, but it happened before court with me. When we were first arrested and taken to the homicide department division in DC, I remember a detective asked us what happened. And he said, well, your co-defendant said, this is what happened. And I said, well, if he said that, you believe what you want to believe. I don't really have anything to say to you. And he said, well, since you want to be a smart at it, I'm going to make sure you be Title 16. So at the time, I didn't know whether he had the authority, the power. I didn't know what Title 16 meant. None of that meant anything to me at the time. I'm tired. Someone lost their life. I'm sad. I'm angry. I'm just dealing with every emotion in the book. So it didn't mean anything. And when I got to court, now the judge is saying, Mr. Ellis, you are now will be charged as an adult. And still then I'm like, but I'm 16. I'm not an adult. What do you mean? And my lawyer said, I would explain this to you. You know, but even when the judge announced that, it didn't register to me because at 16, I'm not an adult. So how can you be able to do this to me from the 16-year-old child? So none of it registered me to be able to.
Thank you. Professor Henning, what is the bounty of a child being sentenced in juvenile court versus?
Yeah. First of all, I mean, it just really builds on so much of what we've already said, which is that juvenile courts in particular are historically designed to allow for the rehabilitative interventions, right? So the goal is to understand the young person's unique needs and environmental context and tailor a plan, right, that meets that child's needs, right? So whether that be education supports, grief and loss from the loss of parents, of the death of parents, violence in the community, juvenile courts have, generally speaking, far more rehabilitative mental health services, psychiatric, psychological services. Juvenile courts can send a young person to a rehabilitative out-of-state or in-state facility, hospitals designed to provide intensive, comprehensive services. Also, wraparound services in the community. And that's what we really, want to emphasize, right? And I will say, even for and this, you talked about this, Eddie, even for the most serious repeat offenders. There are evidence-based programs that are designed to work with young people, multi-systemic therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, family functional interventions. The list goes on, but they've been proven and they work. And so we were investing our money in those and sending youth to juvenile courts where they are, they have contracts for those facilities. They have an understanding of adolescent development and can apply and refer kids to those services. That's the value of juvenile court. So thank you. And I just have to say, because can I just say this one thing? I'm one of those folks, again, I really appreciate what you said, Senator Smith. I'm one of those national advocates who advocates for the removal of all children, right, from adult courts, right? And that no child should start in adult court and be reversed back. So, that's number one. The reality is, though, I appreciate what you're saying. We live in a state in which that's the foundation. And so I appreciate that you are working very, very hard to reduce the number of kids who get automatically processed up. And I appreciate the fact that Maryland still has a reverse transfer provision. And we need to invest our resources in making sure that youth advocates and judges and systems actors really understand the reasons why young people need to be reversed back.
Yeah. It seems, though, that that's a heavy burden to reverse back.
Right, it is.
The burden of proof is a heavier burden to prove that your child should benefit from the services as opposed to,
and it's really important. I mean, this part of the conversation is so important. It's the fact that we in Western society we're supposed to be recognizing the innocence of adolescence, right? If you will, right? So this notion that certain children are presumed to be adults and it had to be reverted back, as opposed to where we start. To be quite frank, for middle-class children, we presume childhood, and then it has to be an extraordinary showing to be transferred up. And so Maryland has this very disturbing, if you will, system that presumes kids to be adults, and the phenomenon of adultification due to racial bias. The United States, America, your story from Maryland, we have a long history of presuming that Black children are adults or depriving them of the privilege of adolescence is the way I like to talk about it. Yeah.
So I also had the opportunity to listen to the opposition, the testimonies from those who stood before the General Assembly and said this should not be pets for various species. And so I'm going to ask each of you a question about some of the information that was presented by the opposition. And I'd like to know how do you respond? So I'll start with you, Professor Henning. Opposition testified that the bill minimizes accountability. What's your response to that?
So I think I have two broad themes. First one is this, right? Which is that I think folks have a lot of misunderstanding about what we mean when we talk about accountability and how it works, all right? I think one of the most important myths is people assume that the only way to hold a young person accountable is through a narcissist, right? We've already talked about how that's actually ineffective. That's actually just, it's not accurate, right? And that also too, when you poll, when you educate victims, people who have been impacted by harm, on the differences between adolescents and young people, and you educate them on these evidence-based strategies that work, many of folks who have been impacted themselves by harm really are in agreement that young people should not be treated like adults. So that's a piece of it. Also, there's also a myth that rehabilitation precludes accountability, that somehow, that the two can't go together. I would argue just the opposite. Rehabilitation is a pathway towards accountability, right? So if you think about therapeutic interventions that are designed, to first help the young person understand their own traumas, grapple and understand their own traumas, understand how their own traumas impact their decisions and their behaviors in the community. right? And then thirdly, understand how those decisions impact other people. It's a process, right? And so therapeutic interventions. I'm also thinking about restorative justice, which is indeed both rehabilitative and holding the young person accountable in some of the best ways imaginable, right? So we have some really, we can talk about that later if folks are interested, like successful successful restorative justice programs and how they work. Also, just as a third example of this is thinking about, I mentioned multi-systemic therapy or multi-systemic interventions in a child's life also helps a young person understand how they're situated in the larger cosmos of their world, right? As a student, as a neighbor, as a family member, as a consumer, all the things that we want as a citizen or civilian within a larger network. So all of this is designed, right, to get us towards accountability. And then the second just quick theme that I want to say about accountability is that accountability is deeply tied to a child's sense of fairness and questions about whether or not we are holding adults accountable, right? So we have to ask ourselves before we start talking about holding kids accountable, are our schools, are we holding our schools accountable for providing a fair, comprehensive, equitable education for every child in the city? Are our cities, are we holding our city accountable for making sure that every child has a roof over their head? I could go on. You get where I'm going with this, right? Also, really importantly, are we holding our law enforcement officers accountable, right, for fair engagement, safe and fair engagement with young people? And I have to tell you, our kids say all the time, why? I can't tell you how many clients that I work with who say, well, why should I? Right? Why should I do, what I'm supposed to do? Why should I abide by the laws of society when you all are going to, target me anyway? No matter what I do, no matter what I say, I'm going to be isolated or targeted. So what's the point? So, and the research tells us, this is, not even just anecdote, that the adolescence is the time when our views about law and law enforcement become fixed in our brains. And so those early experiences, negative experiences with systemic unfairness, right, really challenge the legitimacy of authority and cause young people to ask, well, should I even abide by the lawful rules of society? So we have to be accountable first.
Especially when we see law enforcement not following the law. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Children get it.
Children are watching.
Yeah. Senator Smith. Opposition also raised the point that the juvenile system is not meeting the needs of the children that the parent would have responsibility for. So why do we want to send more children to the juvenile system? We've all seen the report that came out from the Ombuds office that talked about what's happening at EJS. How do you respond to that?
And that I was part of that effort to create that ombudsman so that we can understand, have more of a window into what's really happening, so we can hold our government accountable for the services or lack thereof that are available for youth involved in DJS. I will be the first to tell you that what we have now is not adequate, right? It's not the best. It is. We have a long way to go to make sure that we're performing optimal. But it's better than nothing, and that's what you're getting to in the adult system. A, B. The lion's share of these children are coming back to DJS later. So it's not to expand. It's like a stress strain the current workload, because DJS is ingesting that work anyway. We're just wasting a lot of time in the adult system. So we've done twin things. One is to make sure that we have a window into what's happening, and we can employ corrective measures and save money to develop out programs, which I have to say, under the former secretary at DJS, did a very good job in building out some programs. That Winnie Shirley did a really good job. Suffered from a lot of scrutiny, but he did a really good job. I'm not just saying that because he's a constituent and a friend here, but he did a really good job. The new secretary you just confirmed on Friday, Betsy Talentino, is doing a fantastic job as well. And so we are on a really good trajectory to build out more programming. It's not perfect, but we are doing a very good job, and we have a window into what's going on. So I think today, Marylanders, you sitting in this room should feel safe to know that we have a better window of accountability than you've ever had before, and you have more efforts to build out programs that we've ever had before. And that's significant. I mean, because of discussions in places like this that we could having a policymaker that is incorporated.
Mr. Ellis, another statement that was made by the opposition is they fear that children who are sent to the juvenile systems could be released at 21 and return to our communities. How does that promote couples? What's your response, Tim?
I would say, first of all, let's become more proximate with folks. And, because our emotions and feelings can push us to certain ways, or push us in ways of things that are not true at times. Like they talk about crime. Crime has reduced in many states over the years, but people are not really seeing it. Because if I see everything on social media or the news, it seems bigger than what it is, well, actually things has reduced, even violent offenses. So I would say this, a lot of children do age out of the things that they're doing, especially with the opportunities and resources that are provided to them, right? And I always tell people this, my grandma used to say, don't complain about something that you're not truly trying to change. And that's why I involve myself in the things that I'm involved in, because I don't have to. The trauma, the things I've been through, learned, the experience, I can sit back and just live my life. But what's important to me is that the opportunity is there for each LD that we have to provide. And we've seen through data, when we provide those true opportunities for children, that they do change. But we can't have both sides. We're going to complain, but not put resources there. But think about the process of this resource. Where's the parents? We're talking bad about most parents who are actually doing good things, and children are making immature choices. So while support the child, why can't you simultaneously support the parents through this process to make sure the parents are uplifted, because they're the foundation of the jumper to be able to support them, right? So I want the children to have resources, but let's create resources for parents as well to support them modesty towards young people. But a lot of young people do age out of, understand, get around different people, different things, different opportunities, and realize I should have made these choices. Right? I didn't get that choice. At 16, I was charged as an adult. So I didn't get to 16 to 21 to be able to do that. But I have seen people throughout this process, personally and professionally, get the age out and around a lot of the base.
Excellent point, Eddie. All of the experts say that people age out of criminality. I mean, that's the reality. So thank you.